You got the thumbs up.
Oh. My side peripheral vision is now what it once was, or if it ever was. Hi, everybody. This is Nick Vlahos on Nick in the Morning, the podcast. Thanks for being here today, and thanks to Kirk Wessler for joining me again for this edition. How are you, Kirkus?
Good, and it's glad to be back with you.
Thank you. It's been about 8 or 9 months, I think, since we got together the last time for one of these, and aside from a little trip to London Mills to eat a big-ass tenderloin at Spoonies.
That was a good tenderloin.
Yes, it was. I'm looking for an excuse to get back out there at some point and try to eat another one. So if you know of any news going on in the greater London Mills area, just shoot it my way, either you or anybody who's watching us or listening to us today.
Unfortunate news, were they having flash floods with all the rain this morning?
They have floods in London Mills when there's no rain. They have floods in London Mills. So
well, hopefully they survived it.
Yes, hopefully so too, and hopefully they put those tenderloins way up on the top shelf of the restaurant, if nothing else. Just wanted to get with you today and just talk about various and sundry things, sports-wise, maybe even not some sports-wise either. We are just about at the tail end of the local high school season, high school sports season. I believe baseball and softball is going to ramp up this weekend, with some of those games in Peoria, too, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Correct. We've got the 1A, 2A baseball and softball state tournaments being played this weekend. Softball at Eastside, baseball at Dozer Park. And we've got a couple of teams from the Journal-Star circulation area playing. St. Bede's in the 2A baseball, and North Fulton is in the 1A softball.
Actually, I think that's Hall that's in baseball.
What did I say? St. Bede? Yeah, I'm sorry, Hall. Yeah.
There's a lot of people at St. Bede and Hall that would get very upset with you for saying it.
Mea culpa to all you people up there in that I-80 corridor. My bad. Sorry, St. Bede, you didn't make it. Congratulations, Hall, you made it. Sorry about that.
We were just talking about possible news stories in the London Mills area. Well, that North Fulton is one of them because that's one of the schools in that
co-op with the old Spoon River Valley High School,
Is it Cuba's the other school?
Cuba's the other, that consolidated, or not consolidated, still those high schools. But they have the co-op that they call North Fulton. Do our local teams stand a chance of possibly making it to the title? You know what? In 1A and 2A, especially in 1A, anything can happen. In baseball, it always comes down to pitching. But in the smaller schools, you have a smaller pool of players from which to build a pitching staff and survive the pitch limit rules. And so it's a crapshoot because you're going to have to go deeper into your pitching than you would like to in order to get through that final week and win a state tournament. Softball's obviously a little bit different, but again, you're talking about not as much depth where one or two players can really turn the thing. So I think it's up in the air.
The big schools end next weekend, is that right?
Yeah, 3A, 4A will be next week, and the softball will be here at Eastside again, and then the baseball will be up in Joliet. And we've got Washington survived as the one local team in the 3A softball. They'll be playing for the sectional championship in Washington on Saturday at 11 o'clock, which will be the same time that somebody from around here will be playing the baseball championship. As we speak, the semifinals are this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, but last I heard they were kind of iffy on whether to play it or not because of the wet grounds. They might have to postpone the semis to Thursday. So.
Calling them wet grounds would be kind of an understatement. After
Soggy grounds.
Yeah, the biblical rain that we had overnight and this morning on Wednesday morning. It was pretty massive coming in. I thought I was going to have to use a canoe to get into work today. It was so bad.
Yeah, but we'll have a decent chance of having a team in the 3A baseball because all four of the sectional teams are from Metro Peoria.
That's cool.
And so we'll have one playing in the super sectional next Monday night. So you're 50-50 on whether you get a team to state.
Not too shabby. That is a good way to put the bow on a pretty good high school season. I mean, you guys, we had the 40th anniversary of the Journal-Star Honor Roll meet was within the last week or two. I mean, how did that go? It's probably the most stellar track meet anywhere around here, maybe even short of the state finals at this point.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up. And it's always in the eye of the beholder. And obviously the state championships are the pinnacle. Because it's the best from all over the state. And the honor roll meet has always missed a handful of some of the top performers because the boys the honor roll meet is just a couple days before the state meet, and so in particularly longer events, but even in some of the sprints, kids don't want to risk an injury or overexert themselves too close to the state meet, which is understandable. And it's a couple of days after the girls' state meet, and sometimes the girls are leg weary or whatever and want to just rest rather than run or jump or throw. But most of the good top athletes are in that meet, and it's been a big meet, and it's been for bragging rights. Big schools, small schools, it doesn't matter because we put them all in one class. There are no multiple classes, which makes me smile, which makes you
Makes me smile too.
And in a sport like track and field where it's about the individual performance, or should be about the individual performance, the clock don't lie. The measuring tape don't lie. I mean, whoever's the best, I don't care if your school has 90 kids or 9,000 kids. The best kid's gonna win the event or finish higher in the event. So the meet has been a popular thing around here, obviously, for 40 years since Bob Levitt founded it. And the night of the meet, it was just last week.
Yeah.
I was talking to Amanda Young, who is an assistant coach at Dunlap. She's the former Amanda Duvendeck, who's area record holder in the 800 and had a stellar career, not only here, but went to the University of Illinois.
She went to high school at Metamora, right?
Went to high school at Metamora and still holds the 800-meter record for the area at 2:10 and change, I think it is. And I was asking her for a couple of reasons, just perceptions of the meet among today's youth. And she goes, well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I'm kind of old school, even though she's in her late 20s. But she said, I still felt that this was my favorite meet. This is the meet that I really look forward to. Obviously, you aspire to win a state championship, and that's your goal. But the meet that you have the most fun at, the one that you look forward to, is the honor roll meet. So I think there's an awful lot of kids that have looked at it that way, and it's a great meet to go out. We had, I think there were over 300 individual athletes out there when you combine all those who were running in relays or just in relays, and plus all the kids that were in all the individual events. And it was a great crowd. It was a beautiful evening and just a fun meet.
And it also takes an awful lot of people, a lot of volunteers, and a lot of others to put on a meet like that, too. I know Adam White from Running Central, his organization, does an awful lot of work.
Yeah,
with
Running Central and Shazam Racing, we partnered with them about 3 years ago to take over the administration of the meet. And they do the timing, they do the bulk of the entries and the administering of the meet and the putting together of the volunteer force and all of those things. And they do a terrific job. And but the volunteers you cannot say enough for. And a lot of those people are coaches or retired coaches or former track and field athletes who just still love the sport and want to come out and help out. And without them, it would not come off.
Do we have anybody still around who was volunteering at the very first annual meet?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, there are a couple. Now, not Paul Niekris.
Oh, okay.
Volunteered in the beginning, and he's been there since the first meet. Retired Notre Damer,
right?
Or Spaldinger, or whatever it was. I guess back in the
he was at Washington for a while too, wasn't he?
But I mean, he's been around for a long time, and now he gets paid now because we do pay the IHSA officials who come out and are the starters and the referees for the meet. But he would do it for free. I mean, it's just. He's been doing it a long time. Phil Salzer, the retired coach from Peoria High.
A member of the Peoria County Board, I made it.
Yeah. Bob LaCroix, I believe, was at Peoria High when the thing started and then moved to Richwoods and is now retired. Those guys have been there, and I'm sure I left somebody out, but there's Dave Giannone from Farmington,
sure.
Another retired coach, has been involved with every honor roll meet, to my knowledge. So there's a lot of those guys who have been there since the beginning, and they will keep coming out till they drop. And they do sometimes. I mean, it's sad to say, but we had a couple of years ago, we had like within a 12-month period, 3 or 4 long-time honor roll meet workers, coaches, former athletes pass away.
Wasn't Gary Coates from Princeton?
Gary
wasn't
Coates
one of
from Princeton was one. Dave Thacker from Metamora was another. Bill Lease, who obviously was from the Journal-Star, but had left the Journal-Star, but continued to run the honor roll meet, and then he suddenly passed away between seasons, and that's when we went with running Central and Shazam to be the beat director. So.
Speaking of track and field, you went to the boys state finals in Charleston last weekend, correct?
Yeah.
I understand you had a very interesting weekend down there.
It was a lot of fun. I ran or attempted to run in my days in high school and college, and I never qualified for the state meet. People ask me, well, how good are you, whatever. I say, well, I was seriously not bad. I didn't suck, but I was not. I didn't qualify. It was a one-class meet when I was in school, so it dates me there. But that said, I had the opportunity to run at Peoria High distance, and we had a terrific team across the board and terrific coaches.
Bob LaCroix was the head
Bob
coach.
Bob LaCroix was our distance coach and our cross-country coach, and Phil Salzer was our head track coach. Fred Genji was the pole vault coach.
Dr. Fred Genji.
Fred Genji, who was one of the founding soccer people around here for high school sports, by the way. But no, it was basically there's a bunch of us from Peoria High from the 1970s. All of us, for the most part, cross-country guys, so all cross-country / track guys. And we have continued for some time now to try to get together every year in the fall and go to a cross-country meet and then go out to dinner and just relive old times and catch up on how our lives are going. And the group, we may have 12, 15 guys sometimes, and they often come from out of town or whatever. And this time, we'd never done a state track meet. We occasionally would run into each other at the state cross-country meet.
It's a little easier because the state cross-country meet is in Peoria.
State cross-country meet is here in Peoria, and it's interesting as some guys, their kids are running at the state meet, so they come to that. But Geza Arentrue, who was a teammate of mine, same class as I was, class of 73, is now the coordinator of officials for the state track meet, has been for a while. And he was talking to a couple of our former teammates and so forth, and he just got this idea, let's get some of these guys down here at the state track meet. And he reached out significantly to David Ayub, who was a couple of years behind us, but who to this day still holds the all-time best. They don't officially list it as a record, which is nonsense, but we don't have enough time to go into that stupidity.
Or was it English measurements that were used?
Yeah, he ran back then it was the 880, the half mile. And Dave ran the half mile in a state record, and I believe that year it was the national best for high school. It was 148.9. And it was the state record. A few years later, they converted to meters. Okay, so his time, which is shorter on meters, so his time is 148.1 converted to 800 meters. The thing of it is, the state record now is for 800 meters is something like 149 something, which is slower than what he ran for a half mile. So why it's not recognized as the state record is just another one of those stupid things, in my opinion.
What year did Dave run
that? That would have been 1977. And that's the thing. I mean, you stretch that over a decade, like I was saying, some of these guys that we ran with at Peoria High, and it didn't matter because, like a lot of really good programs, the alumni come back. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when we were in high school, guys that had been part of the program before us who were in college and running in college would come back and we would work out with them in the summertime. So you got to be friends and do things with them. And when we were in college, we did the same things with the guys that were in high school behind us, and they did the same things. So you get to know each other and travel around together and so forth in that age group. But we're all officially old now. And so anyhow, Geza got it in. Had this idea. Hey, let's see if I could get Dave down here to the state meet. And he reached out, and we put together. There were several others of us. There was Coach LaCroix, and myself, and Sean Stever, who has remained active in the track and field community and running community for a long time, works in District 150 now, and Rick Parker, who have to mention Ricky because he and David Ayub were teammates and classmates, same year in school. And because of David was so good, Ricky kind of got overlooked, but Rick he was sixth in the 880 that day. I think he ran 154, which would translate to 153 and change in the 800. And I believe he still has the Peoria High record in the mile / 1600 meters. Dave went on to run at the University of Illinois. His career was cut short by injury. Ricky went down and ran on scholarship at Southern University and ran some stellar times down there in the mile and the 1500 and the 800 and so forth. But anyway, so we got these guys together, and several of us drove down there, and we met up, and Dave brought his family. It was just a fun time. Geza arranged for the PA guy to announce and introduce David over the PA, and we pushed him over and said, raise your hand, wave at the crowd.
Was that the first time he had been back?
That was the first time he and Ricky had been back to the state meet since that day in '77 when Dave set the record. Yeah.
Wow. Was that the same year that there was like a relay where like every team in it like broke a national record or something?
1976, the year before that. And in that year, another former Peorian, Schellenberger. What was his? Now I'm going to forget his first name real quick. But anyway, he had been at Richwoods his first 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, and was a very good half-miler as well. And then he moved up to the Chicago area. I can't remember. Age is setting in. I can't remember what school. But when he was a year ahead of Dave. And so when he was a senior and Ayub was a junior, Schellenberger set the state record in the 880. At 149 and something, and David, I think, was second or third. Anyway, in that 1976, it is still the most remarkable high school race and one of the top 2 or 3 races of any kind I've ever seen. The first year that they were competing the 4x the 32,
it'd be the 2 mile
relay, 4x80, now 3,200, 4x800. Okay, and the top, I think it was the top 10 teams, the top 9 or 10, all went under the existing national record.
That's in the Illinois State.
Illinois State,
in like the finals.
Yeah, it had been run in other states before, but this was the first year that it was contested in Illinois, and to this day, the state record, the first 6 the record has been beaten by a couple of seconds. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Elmhurst York now has the record. It's around 7:34. But second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh fastest times are the ones from that 1976 meet, and out of the top 17 times, 10 of them are from that meet. And the top 10 the top 10 teams in that race finished within, I think it was 6 or 7 seconds of each other. And the first 5 teams, I think, were all within 2 seconds of each other. It was just after 2 miles. And they came out of the curve, and it was just like 5 guys running shoulder to shoulder sprinting after this, the last 100 meters of this 2-mile race.
That sounds wilder than a Kentucky Derby.
Oh, it was just insane.
Yeah.
And you had 10,000 people there packing the stands at the stadium in Eastern Illinois, in Charleston, and the place was just unglued. I mean, everybody was on their feet going crazy.
Yeah, how often do you see a 2-mile race come down to like a couple of seconds over that big of the field too?
Yeah.
It's like just virtually everybody in the field was like right there at the end.
It was a great race. And the funny thing is, Dave Giannone likes to talk about how that meet, there was concern about having the 2-mile relay because, it's a long race and it's boring. Who's going to want to watch this? Okay, well, the first one out of the blocks, this is why you want to watch
It was a pretty good selling point, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was.
It's kind of like when they went to two-class basketball. How's this going to work out?
It worked out.
Look what Thornridge did, and you kind
yeah.
of go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. How, now that we're at the end of this high school season, I guess, how would you assess how it went in the Peoria area, at least, how our teams did, some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, that sort of thing?
Yeah, you're talking the spring or the whole year?
The whole year.
The whole year? Well, you got to start, I think, with we had several state champions, which we do every year. Elmwood boys cross country, Dunlap girls cross country, Richwoods girls basketball, Washington wrestling, and all won state championships. And so did, and then Dunlap girls track.
Sure.
So they've got both the state cross country and the state 2A track championship. And the way that they won the state track championship was just dominating. They became the first school in the 3-class era to go over 200 or to go over 100 points scoring. They doubled up the field. I mean, it was just doubled up second place. They qualified kids for state in 16 of 18 events. They qualified for the finals in 14 events, scored points in 14 events. I mean, everything that they qualified in for the finals, they scored. They finished, scored points in. It was just a dominating performance, and those kind of things are fun to watch.
The one outlier, I guess, in some of this is the state boys basketball tournament that still it seems to just get, I hate to say worse and worse every year, but the problems with that tournament just aren't going away. They're not getting any better, and maybe they are getting worse at this point as far as attendance and interest, that sort of thing. Do you see any way out of this at all, any way that this can be fixed?
Well, I think you hit on a pretty interesting hybrid suggestion in a column that you did after the basketball season ended, where, correct me if what I get wrong out of this, but basically you're saying go ahead and play with these classes through the sectionals.
Play a 4-class tournament through the sectionals. Yeah.
Right, and then have the 1A and 2A sectional winners throw them into a super sectional pool, and the 3A, 4A sectional winners put them into a super sectional pool, and have your old style Sweet 16, Elite 8, and Final 4. Excuse me. I think that is an inspired and practical idea. Now, will they go for it? My guess would be, sadly, that the IHSA would not, because once you give people something and you then take it away, they don't want it taken away. So it would be hard, even for some people who really preferred the 2-class system as opposed to the 4, and even maybe some who are adamantly against going to 4, they're going to look at it in terms of their school and their school district or whatever, and look and say, yeah, but I don't know if we want to give up a chance to win the state championship if we have to play a bigger school. I mean, those kind of selfish things enter into it, and unfortunately. But I think it would be a great idea. They have to do something. Our friends up in the Chicago media and some of the Chicago area coaches want to see the big school weekend, 3A, 4A, moved up to wherever in Chicagoland so that they don't have to travel and they don't have to stay overnight and whatever else. And think that I would say that they're probably right, that at least some of the games would get bigger crowds because of the proximity that they would have to people that say, let's go see the state tournament today. That there's there's several million people that could easily do that up there as opposed to a few 100,000 in this part of the state. So I don't know what the numbers would be. They need to do something. But I to do the right thing. To do the right thing would just be say, hey, we messed up. We're going back to 2 classes. That's the end of it.
I couldn't agree more.
And the board could do it because the board made the decision to go to 4 classes in the first place, misguided though it was. but they're never going to turn it back. You don't turn those things back.
And I think that is why so many people, at least the people that didn't want this change to happen, fought so vehemently against it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they knew that once it changed, even if it was a total lemon, there was no way it was going back to what it was.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a way you can't. I don't think you can put the toothpaste back in the tube again. I wish you could. Would it solve all their attendance problems? Probably not,
No.
because there's some other things at work there. I think it would solve most of them. Yeah, I really
solve
do.
a significant percentage of it.
Yeah, definitely.
And just to make sure people understand that the basketball itself remains at a pretty high level, especially on the big school weekend. I mean, you're getting some tremendous players and some tremendous teams down here, and the competition I think arguably is not as good as it could be, because there is so much similarity between 3A and 4A schools for the most part, particularly the 3A size schools that would be able to make it to state and always made state anyway, or frequently made state, not always, but the competition there is so even that if you had more of those schools available to come to state, you would knock out some of the yawner games that kind of pop up now. 1A, 2A, it's a little less. I think it's a little less exciting than it used to be.
I think it's definitely less exciting.
Yeah.
I don't think the basketball's nearly as good. I think you've got a situation now in 2A where it's become basically a Chicago Public League or a private school
tournament. Yeah.
Tournament. I mean, you know, a lot of the bigger 2A, the 2A size public schools end up getting shut out of the thing. I can't imagine they're very happy about that. Who knows what would happen if you had 1A, 2A together? I have no idea. You'd probably get mostly 2As, but there'd probably be some good 1As in there too.
Oh yeah.
I think the quality of the basketball in general would improve tremendously.
I would agree with that. And I think I hate to say 1A basketball sucks, but it's not very. On a whole, 1A basketball is not very good. I mean, from one end of the state to the other, like it is in the bigger schools. And I understand some of that reason why, but that doesn't mean some of these teams should be getting to state. And the other thing is that, as you used to point out when we would argue for the case for staying with two classes, was that there were plenty of what are now 1A schools, some of the smallest schools in the state, not only making it to the Class A in the two-class system, not only making it to the Elite Eight and even the Final Four, but winning it, getting to the title game and here and there winning it. It wasn't like it was an unknown or even a rare occurrence. I mean, it happened with some degree of frequency. And I think some of that was because you got some of those quality teams. People don't tend to be really aware of the smallest schools outside of a given region, and so that they don't they're able to fly under the radar, if you will. And I think some of those teams at Nauvoo-Calusa, which is one of our favorites, obviously, won it in 1998. The Class A tournament was under the radar. I mean, nobody. You probably leading that charge. You and your peanut nose would never have imagined Nauvoo-Calusa making it to state, and that was a quality team.
Yes,
but because nobody respected them, and there were plenty of others. And like when they got to state, Farmington, was the big, Farmington and Hall. I mean, those were the big teams to go after. And they had the targets on their backs. Nauvoo-Calusa didn't. Now, a program like it's not. It's what Illini
West Hancock.
Or West Hancock is what it's called now. The consolidation or the co-op. Now they've got a target on their back because they're a king in that region of the state in 1A, and so it's harder to play with the target on your back than it is kind of being the underdog and catching
under
people
the radar
by surprise.
and just out there to have a good time.
So,
it's and even schools that didn't necessarily win state titles still managed to make it to state and go a fairly long way in that system too. You had schools like Cairo, and you had schools like Liberty and Mount Carroll and a number of other ones too. And in girls basketball, you had a lot of small 1A size schools winning Class A state titles. Schools like Carthage, schools like Nokomis, schools like Carrollton. This is not basketball, this is volleyball, but the very last Class A state champion in volleyball was Hartsburg-Emden, which I believe maybe had about 80 kids in their entire school. But they were always a power in volleyball, and they won a state championship among 300 and something schools, being one of the smallest of the bunch.
And schools with enrollments that were 7-8 times bigger than theirs.
Well, I believe they played Breese Central in the title game that year, and Breese Central had 500 or 600 kids.
Yeah.
But we're way off on a tangent on that. And I don't mean to relitigate this whole thing, but I was thought about it today because I saw a story from my former home state of North Dakota where they're considering going from a 2-class system to a 3-class system in basketball. And my advice to them is,
stop!
Don't, please don't. And there you're talking a state where you have 150 high schools total.
Yeah.
And
it's just not necessary. It's not necessary.
No, it really isn't. I mean, but anyway, let's get off of high schools for a second. Let's talk about the pros. We're in the middle of baseball season now. I mean, we just passed Memorial Day, which is always kind of a benchmark.
Third of the way
as
through.
Far as Major League Baseball is concerned. The National League Central is kind of it's not a mess. It's just, you can't really pick anybody right now. Milwaukee is in first place. They're the front runners, and I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. They're going to be right in this at the end. But I think the Cubs and the Cardinals are going to be too.
Oh, I agree. I think that they're and I don't know what to make yet of the Pirates. I think the Pirates have some things going for them that they could. I mean, they'll at least hang around a while. Mm-hmm. I don't think that they're going to disappear by the All-Star break by any means. Milwaukee has a great bullpen.
Yes.
Their starting pitching is a little bit shaky, but that bullpen. I mean, if you can get to the 6th inning and beyond, if they can get to the 6th inning with a lead, they're going to win a lot of games. The Cardinals and the Cubs are both struggling with different things and trying to figure out still who they are and where their lineup, what their lineup should be, and those things are mysteries. I mean, in a lot of sports, but it seems baseball in particular. And it's the big thing that I always look for is let's first of all just stay competitive to the All-Star break. Stay competitive to the All-Star break. Then assess where you're at. See who makes the big moves trade-wise before the deadline at the end of July, and then it's reposition through August, get to Labor Day, and then if you're within striking distance, then it's a pennant race. If not, and I don't see any reason why both those teams, they're not going to get buried by the All-Star break, and I would think that both of them will be buyers rather than sellers in July before the trade deadline, and I think that I would not be surprised to see it be a 3-way race come Labor Day.
I wouldn't be surprised either. I think that the Cardinals have been, I don't know, surprising is the right word, but their starting pitching has been
Their starting
impressive.
Pitching is outstanding, and they are deep, deep, deep in pitching in the organization. Excuse me. But
he gets choked up talking about the Cardinals, you got to understand.
Their everyday lineup is just confounding. Marcell Ozuna comes in and he was expected to be the big bat. I think he misses playing with Stanton. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things you can't ever for sure tell when you're looking at players is, okay, how much did you benefit by hitting in front of or behind, the big gun? And he comes in and they expected him to be the big gun, and I'm not, he needs another big gun with him, and I think you'll see his production go up. That I think is the biggest thing that that the Cardinals need to find is another big bat. And then obviously, Dexter Fowler has been awful. Matt Carpenter has showed some signs here and there of coming around a little bit. But those are two bats that they really counted on that have not produced. And then they've been riddled with injuries. I think they've got something like 9 or 10 guys on the disabled list. So those things happen. And that the interesting thing there is I'm a Mike Matheny critic as far as how he manages the everyday lineup and how he manages his bullpen. But he is really good at managing people. And I think as he proved 3 years ago when they had a not dissimilar run of injuries throughout most of the season and played without some key guys, they won 100 games and won the division. Mm-hmm. they were shot at that point and didn't have what it took to get through the playoffs, but they got to the playoffs. And I think that's on him. I mean, that they were able to do that because he kept them together and kept them competitive and kept them driving in the face of all the adversity. The Cubs, I'm not so sure that part of the Cubs situation is that they won the World Series ahead of schedule.
You can make a legitimate point for that. About now was when a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah, last year, this year is when the timetable. Hey, be ready to win World Series in 2017, 2018, and they jumped and won it in 16. Now the expectations, and you're playing with the target on your back. Mm-hmm. That's part of it, and you carry that burden. And players will tell you, well, it's not that big a deal, but I think history proves that generally it is. And some of those guys, even though they were young, maybe in that 2016 season they had career years. We just didn't know that they had career years yet.
They didn't have much of a career to judge it on at that point.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, you got a guy like Anthony Rizzo who's just not having a really good season.
He's showing signs of coming out of it a little bit now, but
I mean, his numbers are not real good, but he's still, who in baseball would not want Anthony Rizzo in their lineup? I can't think of anybody. I'd love the guy. So, he'll produce because over time, that's what he's proven he's going to do. Now, maybe he's just going to have an off year. I don't know. I mean, they're still, my point, and you and I have had this argument over and over, and you're just bemoaning how much the Cubs stink and what their problems are, and they're just not a very good team and all this. It's baseball. And I agree with you that you don't win a pennant in April, but you can lose it in April. I agree with that. You don't, but it's like I said a few minutes ago. You don't. The thing is, you don't want to get buried in the first half of the season. It's like figure out who you are, make your moves, stay competitive, stay within reasonable distance. Be in the hunt, and then when you get to the second half of the season, make your necessary moves and put the pedal to the metal and go.
They just have to. The Cubs have to settle the back end of their rotation a little bit because with Darvish, I understand Darvish is not critically injured or anything like that. He should be okay here in a little while. He's got to get right, and then Chatwood's got to stop walking everybody in the ballpark.
Right, and see, there's the thing. You invest in two pitchers like that and figure, okay, we've fixed our pitching, and then plop, you get what the Cardinals have experienced with a couple of their guys as well. I mean, it's just. Those things happen.
Well, I'd also like to see, you mentioned that the Brewers' bullpen has been outstanding. I want to see how outstanding it's going to be in August and September.
When their arms burn off. Yeah. If their arms burn off.
If they do.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't.
Right.
Maybe they might not. Maybe Craig Counsell will use them judiciously and everything will work out fine. They've been awfully impressive to this point. But when we get into the race and the dog days and everything else, and we'll see how the cream will rise to the top at some point in those games between the Brewers and the Cubs and the Brewers and the Cardinals, one of them's going on today as we speak.
Yep.
Those are big games.
And one of the things with the Brewers, they're no slouches at the plate either. And when Ryan Braun is to date your fifth or sixth best hitter this season, you've got something good going.
It never ceases to please me to see Ryan Braun get booed in his own ballpark when the Cubs fans get up there at Wrigley North. Where I will be in a couple of weeks, actually, probably booing him as well. I want to go back to basketball season for a second here. Obviously, we haven't talked since the big Final Four appearance by Loyola this last year in the men's tournament. Just kind of coming out of nowhere, except for maybe those of us who live in Missouri Valley country who maybe knew how good these guys were, and maybe they had a chance at least to go far in the tournament. Maybe not necessarily go to the Final Four, but at least not be a rollover in the first couple of rounds. How does the Valley capitalize on that? How do they capitalize
That's
on
a good question.
What Loyola has done? How does Loyola capitalize on it, for that matter?
Well, the first thing Loyola does is, first step they made is invest in the program. New contract for Porter Moser. Hopefully his assistants were given good bumps, and they've got a bigger salary pool for quality assistants to stay with the program, because that's been a little bit of a revolving door for him over the 7 years. But that's part of it, is just them investing in it. Two is for him now to capitalize on that within his recruiting base, which is essentially Chicago. Not that he doesn't have reach beyond that, but he's done from the time he got Milton Doyle early in his tenure there till now. I mean, he's done a nice job of getting Chicago city kids, and suburban too. But I mean, they're respected now.
If I may say, that reminds me a little bit of when Dick Versace was at Bradley. He would get maybe not necessarily the best Chicago kids, but he would get quality Chicago kids, maybe a level or so below that.
Yeah.
And he built a pretty good program out of that.
Yes, he did. And I hear some from Bradley fans saying, "Why can't we do what we did when Versailles? Well, just go up to Chicago, get some kids." Well, while I just praised Porter Moser for getting those kids out of Chicago, I mean, he's getting some good players. But it's a different deal now. You don't just say, "Well, we're going to go up and establish a relationship with the Chicago Public League coaches and even the Catholic League coaches and bring their kids." No, because you got to now go through all the politics of the AAU situations, and it would take another year to try to explain that totality to people. I mean, it's just convoluted. And it doesn't mean that you can't recruit kids from up there, but this is not the 1980s anymore, so let's just suffice to say that. But back to your original question about the Valley, if you're other Valley schools, you say, "Hey, look, we just put another everybody said we were dead, Wichita left, and we just put another team in the Final Four." And excuse me, unlike when Wichita went and with a budget that was 2-3 times larger than anybody else's at least, the budgets in the league are much more in line with each other. And so it's the thing of, hey, Loyola did this. The rest of the league can look at it and say, hey, we can do this too. Maybe we don't all make the Final Four. I mean, that's a long shot. But we can get to the tournament. We can get in and we can go deep into the tournament. And once you start winning in the NCAA tournament and you get the right matchups and you get a little mojo going, anything can happen. And that's what the Valley's got to capitalize on. I mean, they outside the Power 5 or the Power 7. I mean, in basketball, it's the Power 5 plus the Big East and half of the American Conference, and the rest of them are all in kind of the same. The other top conferences are all fighting the same battle. Well, the Valley has put teams into the Final Four. I mean, it's just I think in the last 10 years, it's just the Valley, the Colonial, and the West Coast Conference and the Horizon.
Yeah, that's
right.
It. That's pretty impressive, for a league that gets maligned by a lot of people. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Where does Bradley fit in at this point? I mean, how close are they? Maybe not to making a Loyola-esque run, but at least getting a bid, maybe.
Yeah. The tough thing for the Valley in the current way that the selections are being made is that there seems to be an assault on the mid-majors. Yeah. There's which is a discussion for another day as well. So the at-large bid is much more difficult to come by than it was even 5 years ago. But you've got to do the things that help lead to an at-large bid: strengthen the schedule and keep getting better. If you keep getting better and you compile the strength of schedule, you're going to put yourself in a situation to get an at-large bid if you happen to fall short in the Valley tournament. In the meantime, you just keep trying to get better as a program. And I think that's what Brian Wardle's doing. I mean, they have shown progression each of these years. I think they're going to continue to show progression. I like the foundation that he has built. I like the way that he's going about it with mostly 4-year players. And the culture of development that he's trying to instill there. I mean, they're not going for quick fixes. And They are investing in players over a period of time, and it's about player development. Make this guy better next year than he was this year. Make him better the next year after that, and then keep trying to raise your level of recruiting. I think they finished 5th in the league this year,
and they were the last team to beat Loyola,
and they were the last
team. Michigan.
That's right. And so they finished 5th in the league this year. They dropped a couple of home games that they shouldn't have dropped, or they could have been 3rd. So I think, and they only lose, of the players with significant minutes They really only lose Dante Thomas. Significant loss, but I think that he is replaceable in some fashion with the new players they've got coming in. They will be. They absolutely should be in the hunt for top 3. Not to say that they absolutely will get there, but they're going to be in that top 3 or 4. They may get some votes from people in the preseason poll to win it. I don't know. I mean, I would look at it right now that Illinois State would be the favorite. But between Illinois State and Bradley and Southern Illinois and Loyola, and you never count out Northern Iowa, I think those and Valparaiso, I'm really going to be interested, even though they were last. They were a very young team, and there's some really nice talent, and they've recruited pretty well. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a big move that they make this year. But I think Bradley's going to be in the hunt. They're not going to be the favorite to win it, but they're on the right track.
It's going to be a very competitive league next year. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Bradley's missing right now, I've told several people this, if you go back to the most comparable era to right now was back in the 90s, when Jim Molinari was rebuilding after the mess that was left when Stan Albeck was fired, and build it not quite from the scratch zero that Wardle has been rebuilding, but rebuild it almost from as much devastation. And the key to Jim Molinari's elevating it that last step into Valley, winning a Valley championship and getting an NCAA tournament, was signing Anthony Parker, who was a very good player but was not a top-level recruit. And Mo was great at finding those guys that were a little under the radar, that a little undersized at the time they recruited them and had the potential. I think Anthony was maybe 6'4" and 180 coming out of high school.
He was a pretty slight kid.
And he turns into a 6'7", 215-pound pro. But he could play. I mean, the first time I saw him play, it's like, this kid can play. And it doesn't. The rest of it, he's an impact player as soon as he steps on the court, as in college, and that's the player they're missing right now. Now I don't know. Maybe it's in the program. There's some people that think maybe Elijah Childs, who had a really good freshman year as a 4, in the 3-4 spot, maybe, and played some post. Maybe he becomes that guy. I don't know. I don't think he's quite as polished as Anthony was at the same stage, but he certainly has physical tools and some abilities that could take him a long way in this game. But right now, there's not the obvious guy that you say, oops, there's their guy. And to compare it to another guy that Brian Wardle had his previous stop in Green Bay as head coach, his Kiefer Sykes, a guy that turned into became a national name as a point guard. So that's the guy. That's the difference maker. The guy that you can sit there and look to and say, "Hey, he's our guy. We need 25 points from somebody tonight." He goes and
your
gets
star,
it.
So
he
to
goes
speak.
and
Just
gets
you
it.
got the one guy who can grab the game by the throat a little bit.
Yeah,
you're right. I think that's the one thing they are missing, and if they can find that,
there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Who you got in the NBA Finals?
I think the Warriors.
You're not just saying this because of Sean Livingston.
No,
you really believe it?
No, I think I'll tell you what, LeBron, I held out on the Michael Jordan is the greatest. And it's kind of a stupid argument, who's the greatest of all time. Yeah. I remember back when it was always, who's greater, Chamberlain or Russell? Okay, ultimately, does it really matter? No, but it makes for some good barroom arguments. But I'll tell you what, I have never seen a player like LeBron James. And especially since he added the three-point consistency to his arsenal. The guy, there's nothing he can't do on a basketball court. Absolutely nothing. And he's bigger than Michael was, so he can play all 5 positions. I mean, he'd be undersized as a post, but do you know a post? I mean, first of all, the game's changed, so you don't have the traditional post play like you used to 20 years ago.
No, you don't have the 7'3" big guy lumbering around.
Does anybody think that LeBron wouldn't just own that? I mean, the guy is phenomenal. So you have that player on the court, and anything can happen. That said, I mean, let's start counting the guys that are like right behind him that play, between Durant and Curry and Thompson, and then the pieces like Draymond Green and Sean Livingston and some of their younger guys.
Don't forget Iguodala.
And Iguodala, if he can come back here in the finals, I just think the Warriors are going to win that.
It's amazing to me how how valued Sean Livingston is on that team. If you hear people talk, Steve Kerr and the other players on that team, they fall all over themselves in praising him. It's amazing to me, and it's gratifying to me to see somebody from Peoria have that kind of effect on people.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting during the regular season. You would read some of the fan discussions in Golden State, the Warriors fan forums, and there was an ongoing thing. I mean, there was a lot of support for Livingston, but there's always, as there is in any fan base, it's time to get rid of Livingston. He's just not producing. He's just not this. He's not. And I'm like, you just don't get it. And I'm not saying that just because he's a Peoria guy and we've known him all his life and all those things. Just like you said, I mean, Steve Kerr going into to Game 7 the other night was saying he's our rock, man. I mean, especially with Iguodala out from that second unit. I mean, you look at what Game 6 and Game 7, okay, and the Rockets get off hot and they're like on the verge of busting the game open, and Sean comes in, and no, he's not draining three-pointers, not even scoring a lot of points, but he's a settling force because he gets the ball in his hands and he comes down, and maybe they're playing out of rhythm, they're too fast, they're only getting, they're not making the passes, they're not making the extra pass. He comes in, and the next thing you know, they're moving the ball. They're moving the ball again. They're getting back in their patterns. Guys are cutting. They're not just standing around. And it's a calming influence. I mean, on both ends. I mean, he's such an underrated by some, I think. I mean, people in the league don't. But his length and smarts, I mean, he's so good defensively. There's a guy, I mean, he can guard 4 positions. Mm-hmm. I mean, he can't guard the post, but, I mean, like I said, there's not traditional post play anymore, so who cares?
No. Yeah, I love talking basketball when it's 90 degrees outside. That's wonderful. Let me wrap up by asking you about your golf game. How are you hitting it this year?
I've only been out 3 times this year, but I did shoot 83 Monday at Metamora Fields.
I hate you.
It was, I didn't know what to expect, but I guess maybe that's the key. Don't play as much and you get better.
I have found that it doesn't matter how much I play or how little I play. I shoot about the same no matter what. Yeah. And I played.
But you have fun, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I played Sunday when it was 95 or 95% humidity. That wasn't a lot of fun as it turned out. But I'm going to play a couple days here. I played back in Arizona. I went there in April and played Tucson.
I hate you.
Okay, now we're even. Tucson, Arizona is one of the most underrated golf cities, I think, maybe in the country, which is going to sound strange because it's in Arizona and everybody thinks, Arizona golf.
Yeah, but when they think of Arizona golf, they think of Phoenix area and Sedona and
they think of places where it costs $100 to play around and that sort of thing, but you can get a lot of good courses in Tucson for not a lot of money. You know that because you've played at a few of them yourself.
Yep. So, yeah, I love Tucson. I mean, it's just a beautiful setting. Yeah, it's beastly hot in the summertime. There's no question about that. But you don't go out in the middle of the day. I'm kind of partial to the desert. I like the desert. I just love Tucson. I mean, sitting there between the mountains. The weather's gorgeous. The food is great. The evenings are just even in the summer. The evenings are pleasant. I mean, it's warm, but it's that dry heat, and you sit back with a nice drink, and the golf is just terrific. And you get mad. I mean, last time I was out there, I think it was 2 years ago, for 3 or 4 days, and played golf around the Tucson area. And it was the one day I was just stinking up. I mean, I wasn't doing anything right. And desert golf, you know how that goes.
Oh yes.
It's just like you hit it off the fairway, and it's
goodbye.
Like it's goodbye. Forget it. But I'm sitting there, I'm just muttering, and then I turn, and we're on the course was on a mountainside. And I sit there and I look, and it's like, now how can you get mad at that?
Yeah, sometimes you just got to look around and just see where you are.
Look up, and you're in the midst of all that, beautiful climate, beautiful scenery, and it's like, now I'll live with this. And besides, there's a nice cold margarita and tremendous food waiting for me at the end. So
those of you who are listening to this podcast can't see it, obviously, but those of you who can watch the video feed, I'm wearing a shirt that says Desert Storm 2015 on it, which was given to me by a friend of mine who lives in Tucson. Every year he has a big golf weekend there, and he makes shirts for everybody. There's a cactus on it and everything else. I was just telling Kirk before we came on the air that he decided to change the name of it this year from Desert Storm, because every time one of us wore this someplace, a military veteran would come up to us and say, well, when were you in Desert Storm, and where did you serve, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I didn't feel like I didn't want to disrespect them by saying, no, it's just a stupid golf tournament. Don't worry about it. But,
and there are no saguaro cacti in
not in
Iraq.
Baghdad. No, not the last time I checked. Yeah, I can't wait to get back to Tucson again, but not until October. I'll wait until it cools off a little bit.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Kirk Wessler, for being with us today.
Glad to do it. It's always
a
fun.
pleasure. Yes, it is. It's always a pleasure. We'll do this again before not too much longer.
Sounds good.
And thank you all for listening and watching on Nick in the Morning, the podcast. We'll see you next time.